What is up, fight fans? It is time for the MMA plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We are coming to you live from the number 38 presented by Volo. Got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards holding it down for me as always each and every week. Guys, the Mile High Sports Network is doing incredible things all across the board here in the sports world. First off, give me a follow online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. But secondly, go follow them at Mile High Sports. They are the go-to guys for all things in the sports world out here. You have CU Buffs coverage. They were more competitive last week, but still dropped another one against West Virginia. The Broncos, they had a rough outing overall on Thursday Night Football last week against the Raiders, but it's always better to learn off of a win. The Broncos had an extra couple of days of rest going into this weekend's home matchup against another bitter division rival in the Kansas City Chiefs. Hopefully they can get it done with this. Then they get a couple of weeks of rest through Thanksgiving week or going into the Thanksgiving week as they have the bye next weekend. So, that's hopefully something that they can continue to build off of in that process there for the boys in orange and blue. You have the Avalanche on fire. I mean, overall, Denver sports right now are kind of the talk of the pro sports world. You have the Broncos at 8-2, you have the Avalanche on fire, leading the league in points, and then you have the Nuggets sitting at 8-2. They're on the road tonight with the second leg of a back-to-back against the Clippers. Make sure that you check out the boys here on the network for more coverage on that. Give Mile High Support some love and show them their support wherever possible. Hit that like, share, and subscribe, whether that be on the podcast side of things, the website, merch drops. Down here at the number 38, if you want some Mile High merch, there is now an on-demand vending machine that you could pick up some of that stuff too as well. So make sure that you check that out if you're ever down in these areas. And as always, for Denver sports, you could always catch those here in this tremendous sports bar for all of your viewing pleasure there. In the Colorado rundown, there is going to be a few shows across December. I'm really excited for what we have to offer to close out the year here in Colorado on the combat sports scene. We have CJJC returning to the cage at the Stampede. That is going to be on December 6th. You also, the following weekend after that, you have multiple events going on. You've got Sparta as well as our 5280 Muay Thai Fight Series show happening. That is going to be kicking off with doors opening at 12, fights at 1. A Muay Thai matinee, then you get out of there to be able to watch Brandon Royval in the main event that night for the UFC. What a better fight day that you could have. Following weekend, you have Colorado Combat Club going to be getting after it at the Stampede as well. That's going to be our final show of the year there, and I believe the final show in Colorado for 2025. Could be mistaken. There might be someone else that's peeking in there toward that last weekend, but that is going to be, again, going down on December 20th. Going to have some more details and a lot more information on these cards as the time grows closer, And then you also have Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship going to be here in December as well. We're going to transition now into the weekend recap. This last weekend out in Las Vegas, there was a welterweight showdown. In the main event, you had Rude Boy Randy Brown and Gabriel Bonfim. Now, Gabriel Bonfim, he's certainly the better of the two Bonfim brothers. He moves his record up to 19-1, had a bonus earning knockout with that clinch knee. He's a part of this whole new wave of welterweights that are pushing their way toward the top and have pretty much injected a whole new landscape of guys into that division, where for a while in the previous era, there was a lot of log jamming. There was, obviously the illustrious run of Kamaru Usman, but there was a lot of peacocking and politics that went on with guys like Colby Covington and so on and so forth out there. But we're going to talk more about the welterweight division because this week at Madison Square Garden, you're going to have quite a few high stakes on the line welterweight matchups, shall we say. In the co-main event the other night, you had Joseph Morales submitting Matt Schnell by guillotine. In the feature fight, a welterweight bout, you had Uros Medic taking on Muslim Salikov. The dentist, he picked up a victory by KO/TKO in that first round. The next fight, Taco Padilla knocked out by ground and pound Gabriel Bonfim, or excuse me, Ismail Bonfim, brother of Gabriel Bonfim. This one, I believe, the UFC is kind of in a bit of a predicament here when you look at the Bonfim brothers. So on one hand, obviously you have Gabriel, who is surging toward the top, 19-1. But on the flip side, his brother has lost 3 of the last 4. And he's had 2 just absolutely mind-boggling weight misses that are of a preposterous amount. He missed weight by about 5 pounds in the first scheduled fight against Vince Pichel, and that fight ended up not happening because Vince was like, "No, I'm not gonna go and fight a guy who is basically half a weight class above me." Why does that make sense? And especially for the small percentage that he would have been paid from the penalty. Well, Bobby doesn't make a whole ton. So yeah, when you're talking, oh yeah, well, you could say take his 30%. Well, what's 30% of a 12K? That's not a lot when you're looking at the value side of things for somebody who is on the other side. But when you're Chris Padilla and you're someone who is still on the rise and only a few fights into the UFC, it's a different dynamic. And Taco went out there, took the fight, won by KO TKO. Again, with a crazy weight disadvantage based on the miss by Bonfim. But again, with Ismail, he has lost 3 of the last 4 with a couple of awful weight misses. Does he get a chance for a third, or do they cut ties? Does the performance of his brother help save him? I guess time will tell. I told you last week that this fight was going to be a banger between Christian Leroy Duncan and Marco Tulio. It delivered. This was a KO TKO by spinning back fist. When you have 2 guys like that who are big, who throw with bad intentions, it's only a matter of time before somebody falls. Jamal Emmers defeated Hyder Amil by unanimous decision. The next fight, man, you had Johnny Barcelos, who continues to just figure out ways to get it done. He defeats Ricky Simone by unanimous decision. That cut that was underneath the chin of Ricky Simone was basically, it was almost like side of the mouth to side of the mouth. The split on the underneath, it was a nasty split. The next bout was a women's bantamweight matchup. Got to give a shout out to our homegirl, Jackie Cavalcanti. She picked up a win over the former title challenger and Shitara Mayra Buena Silva. The next matchup, you had a heavyweight fight where I think that we're seeing somebody who is starting to kind of rise the ranks in a way, if you will. Obviously he's only a couple of fights in the mix, but he understands it. He understands the climate of where the heavyweight division is right now, in that there's not a whole lot of life. And that's Josh Hokett. Josh Hokett, a guy who had a brief stint in the NFL, now has made his way into the UFC. He had a big KO TKO victory by right hook in the first round the other night. That's now back-to-back victories over a couple of Brazilians, in which he mentioned in that post-fight call-out that we have the second coming of somebody like Chael Sonnen. Somebody who has the ability. And I also, just to put it in perspective here, like we can talk about cutting promos or going out and saying some crazy things out there on the mic afterwards, but to have something in the can ready to roll the way that Hokett did, and then to go out there and execute on that promo after getting into a fist fight, it's incredible. It's awesome. I love seeing it. He's somebody who I think will continue to push toward the rankings and toward the hierarchy of the division. Now, what that ceiling is, hard to tell. He's got wrestling experience all the way back to when he was a kid, so he does have a tremendous amount of combat sports background. He's conditioned to physical punishment, a la being in the NFL, played college football, so on and so forth. The other guy that we mentioned has a knack of a flair and who gets it and cuts promos in the heavyweight division right now, Walter Walker. Well, who did Josh Hokett call out in traditional Chael Sonnen fashion? Walter Walker. With the Walter Walker, you absolutely suck. Well, We'll see if these guys get the chance to get in there and mix it up with each other. It's going to be two guys who are early into their UFC run, but are very athletic in both of their respective rights. Their differences stylistically, but it could make for an entertaining matchup in a division that desperately needs these type of athletes who are hungry, who understand the business, and who go out there and fight for a finish. Next matchup beyond that, you had Denise Gomes picking up a victory over Tisha Pennington. And then rounding out a couple of fights on the card, you had Daniel Marcos, who moves his record up to 18-1. Hey, man, that kid's for real. He's from Peru. He's got a bright future in this sport. He took on Miles Chapo Johns. Miles Johns is a tough competitor, but this wasn't his night. And then opening up the card, this was a shift in the matchup from what we'd originally spoke about last week. Zach Reese ended up being the guy who went in there against Jackson McVeigh. Zach Reese goes in there. A lot of activity for Zach Reese. Goes in, picks up a rear naked choke victory that opened up the card. On another note, want to give a shout out to Will Roybal of Catalyst Jiu-Jitsu up there in Windsor, Colorado. He picked up a big TKO victory in his MMA debut over the weekend. This is a kid who has a lot of talent, and I think that you should keep your eyes on here on the Colorado scene. You know, he's one fight deep into this MMA run so far, but I've had the chance to be able to see him on the grappling world and throughout other disciplines, you know, and just in the training room up there in the times that I've spent with Connor Leonard from Catalyst. This kid has a lot of potential. Like I say, him and Vic Rangel, two young studs coming out of that camp in Windsor. Moving along from that, though, folks, we are going to jump right into the UFC 322 preview. Like I said, this fight card has a lot of implications in the welterweight division, but overall, the last couple of weeks, there were people online who were bitching about the star power of the last two fight night cards, that they were in the apex and blah, blah, blah. They still had great fights on the cards, by the way, but there's absolutely no way that you can complain about this card. There are two historically significant title fights in the main and co-main slots of this weekend. In the main event, you have Jack Della Maddalena, who is making his first title defense against Islam Makhachev. And Islam is trying to make history by securing a championship in a second division. Islam, if he were to be successful, I believe that makes him the 11th double champion in UFC history. If we have time, we'll talk a little bit more about Islam and that whole dynamic here in just a few moments. In the co-main event, you have Valentina Shevchenko, who is, without a doubt, she's the most decorated women's flyweight champion ever. You could make the argument that she's the most decorated women's champion of all time. The only thing she doesn't have, she didn't win dual divisions the way, say, like Amanda did. But as far as her dominance as a champion, she is the only champion in UFC history, male or female, to earn all 8 of the title defense rubies in the Legacy Belt era. Zhang Weili, on the other side of things, she vacated her 115-pound title, the women's strawweight title, to pursue this super fight and have her chance at a second belt. So I guess technically, that would make, if she were to win, and then if Islam were to win, well, then that would be 11-12. Just to correct my statement on Islam potentially being the 11th. It all depends on what Weili does in the fight before. Valentina is going to be the bigger fighter. Weili, though, is, for lack of a better correlation, more in her prime, whereas Valentina is still a dominant champion, but Valentina today, 2025, is not 2020 Valentina. I do think that she will be as thoroughly prepared as she could possibly be for this fight. The wrestling from Zhang Weili might be a major factor here, but I think that Valentina's jiu-jitsu is superior. As a striker, we've seen Zhang get knocked out. Valentina, the Bullet Shevchenko, has the knockouts on her resume to say that it doesn't matter who it is. On any given night at 125 pounds, she can go out there and she could put you on ice. It should make for a very entertaining fight. Now, if you were to ask me to lean on that, I mean, I want to think that Valentina holds an advantage in this fight just simply because of her prowess and what she's done so far. And this is the first time of Zhang at a higher weight, so we'll have to see what Weili does now that she's at 125. How well adjusted can she be for that size difference in an actual fight? We know that she's strong. I mean, we saw her pick up Francis Ngannou, but that doesn't necessarily translate to strength within the actual fight itself. In the feature bout, we have Sean Brady taking on Michael Morales. This is likely a title eliminator fight. Michael Morales has been a guy ever since he came into the UFC that we have spoken of that this is a kid who has title potential. This is a kid who is going to rise the ranks and is going to be a problem going forward. And he's fulfilled on all of those predictions. He's the son of two fighters and black belts. He's still very young overall in age, but as far as his experience goes, he's 18-0. He's got a lot of fights under his belt so far. He's good everywhere. He's got pop in his hands. He's a ridiculous grappler. And he's got some savvy fight IQ to him. Sean Brady, though, is one of the most menacing grapplers of this era in the 170-pound division. When Sean Brady gets you down and puts your back on the canvas, the systems that he works from that spot are so dominant that very few can ever figure out their way out from underneath it. This is something that I think you might see a bit of the striking get exploited potentially a little bit for Sean Brady. It's not to say that Sean isn't a good striker. I think that he's an effective striker, but if we're talking about a thoroughbred, that's Michael Morales. We're maybe looking at more of a grinder versus a thoroughbred type of situation here in this fight. Following that, we have another welterweight matchup. You have the former 170-pound champion in Leon Rocky Edwards, who is going to be taking on the always dangerous, always entertaining Carlos Prates. After Prates' last fight, correct me if I'm wrong, Danny, I said that I would love to see this Leon Edwards matchup.
I believe so.
Matchmakers answered the fight gods, answered old Kurtzy boy over here. And I think that we're going to see a potentially entertaining fight on the feet. Leon always likes to fight at range when he's working away. Leon isn't the most dangerous or devastating striker. Yes, he does have that historic knockout that he scored against Kamaru Usman. But if you remember that fight, I mean, he was losing all 4 minutes and 50 seconds, or 4 rounds, 4 minutes and 50 seconds of that fight until he got the knockout. Carlos Prates on the other side of things, he's coming for blood every single fight. The way that he works with his lead hand and tries to draw his opportunities off of it, will work from an open stance. He creeps that shin up over the shoulder so fast. Well, you don't give him the read for the kick. Okay. Well, there's a fist or an elbow coming behind it. And, oh yeah, maybe one of the more powerful attacks of that entire arsenal is his knees. He's facing a former champion. He's facing a guy who has been to the apex of the sport, who has been the top of the top and has his name etched in history as a champion who has a title defense or a couple of title defenses under his name. But Leon, though, in his last couple of performances, has not looked very inspired. What do we see from him this weekend? You guys could let me know. What do you think for your prediction for that matchup between Prates and Leon Edwards? You could let me know online. Hit me up on Instagram or on Threads at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. And then you get this fight as an opener for the main card. You have Beneil Dariush taking on Benoit Saint-Denis. There is no way that fight does not have some tremendous highlight factor to it. Saint Denis, I mean, we know that he's going to be marching forward. That's his MO. He's a soldier formerly of the French Special Forces who is actively always trying to pursue finishes within his fights. Has he had some ups and downs? Sure, but he's also fought some of the most decorated guys of this era. Beneil Dariush has been around the block a time or two. He's seen about everything that you can offer and has been one of the stalwarts of the top ranks of the 155-pound division for quite some time. I think that Beneil has a more complete skill set. And especially if this were to go down to the canvas, Beneil by far and large is the better grappler. His credentials speak to that. But when you have somebody who has the type of pop in their hands the way that BSD does, we've also seen Beneil get chinned a few times. It makes for a wildly entertaining fight. Styles make fights. The matchup is insane. On the undercard, we get to see if Bo Nickel is able to bounce back from his first loss where he looked like a fraud against RDR. He spoke about it in an interview this last week about how he had never really gotten hit and had to go through some physical adversity in his fights up to that point, which is valid, that he didn't really get put into the fire or wasn't really hurt to the extent to where he had to dig himself out of a hole. But I think that also speaks to some of the criticisms that Bo has had or some of the things that have been spoken for him in his training and programming, and that he might not be getting pushed to that brink in the training room. A lot of top trainers out there will tell you that you should be pushed to that brink in your camp. You should be pushed to the point to where you feel that you're at extreme odds in the training room and you have to figure out how to push through and break through those barriers way before you ever make that walk to the octagon. Bo saying that, I think, only furthers the belief that he was not getting pushed to that level in the training room. Can't say for certain. Was not there in those camps, did not witness things, but it leads you on to this analysis to where that could very well have been the case. You have a middleweight matchup between Roman Kopylov and Gregory Hobocop Rodriguez. There is no way that this fight does not deliver on fireworks and explosive action. Two guys who have heavy hands, who have a considerable amount of knockouts on their record. You also have the Dagestani background of Roman Kopylov. You know, he's got some wrestling and he's got some grappling. He's not a world champion in grappling the way, say, that RoboCop is, but you have two guys who have depth to their skill set, but their primary modality is to go out there and to try to punch your head into the rafters. No stranger to bloody fights on either side of things, too. These guys will go out there and will slug it out. Then you got Tracy Cortez taking on Aaron Blanchfield. You sold me at Tracy Cortez. No further analysis needed. You have the fan favorite in Malcolm Wellemaker. He's making his return. Now, can he continue this meteoric rise in the bantamweight division? Only a couple fights deep so far in the UFC, but he's knocking everybody out in the process. This was a question that was asked on the internet a few days ago. Is construction the best base for MMA? Well, there may be a little bit of something to that. You know, Malcolm Wellemaker spoke about it on an interview just a couple of days ago, for that matter, saying that throughout the early portion of his career and until he had gotten those first couple of bonuses in the UFC, well, he was working construction through that entire time. Said he would be dead dog tired from working through the day, but where most guys would go home, crack up a cold one, and hang out on the couch with the family or whatever for the rest of their evening, he was then making his way to the gym and grinding it out for a couple of hours, waking up the next day, doing it all over again. Who else has some similar stories like this? Well, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, Merab Dvalishvili. So that begs the question once again, is construction as a day job, the best base for MMA. Kyle Daukaus looks to continue his redemption tour after a bonus inning knockout in his UFC return against Michel Pereira. This time he takes on another longtime veteran of the middleweight division in Gerald Meerschaert. GM3 has dropped 3 in a row. He may very well be fighting for his job here. GM3 is a submission specialist, but Daukaus is a slick grappler in his own right. So it may be hard to pull off the sub there, but if GM3 gets it done, I would venture to say that would be how it is. Any other finish or any other route in the fight, whether it goes the cards or is a matchup that stays on the feet, I think the advantage leads its way to Daukaus in this one. Next matchup, I want to give a shout out to Chepe Machine Gun Mariscal. He steps back into the octagon for a rematch against Pat Sabatini. We've said it before that Chepe had a UFC resume before he even got to the UFC. He beat Pat Sabatini back in 2018. Both of these guys have made considerable improvements since their last matchup. But, I think it's worth noting that the growth and evolution of Chepe has to be marveled at. This guy is someone that you have to put him out. Otherwise, he is going to continue to come forward, and he's going to find a way to win that fight. Right now, Chepe's riding an 8-fight win streak, and he is coming in with an abundance of confidence against a guy who he already has a victory against, and also gets him up out of bed. That's something to be said when you have somebody who has the accolades or who has the recognition, say, of someone like a Sean Brady, or of a Pat Sabatini, who got praises from his teammates like Sean Brady, Joe Pyfer, Andre Petrosky, so on and so forth, saying that he's pound for pound that dude of that gym. Just makes you go to think that this is going to be an incredible rematch that is now years in the making. The next bout, you have Angela Overkill Hill. She has a tough one against Fatima Klein. Now, Fatima Klein, she has a high ceiling. She's somebody who trains with Aaron Blanchfield ever since she came into the UFC by way of, she was a former CFFC champion. She made her UFC debut on short notice here in Denver last year. She's someone who they've spoken of that has potential title aspirations. Overkill is going to be a big test for her just based off of the experience factor alone. I mean, Angela's time in the saddle is something that is not really matched with a lot of her peers. Her frequency of activity through the years has also been high. Angela has continued to grow her skill set. She's gotten better in the grappling department, but we do know that her Muay Thai is probably what most would say is her bread and butter. Klein, though, if she gets the kill against Overkill, who is sitting at number 12 right now, that is surely going to land her a spot in the rankings and will continue her ascent toward those title aspirations. The next matchup, we have the homie Baisangar Susarkayev, who takes on Eric Makhachev. Now, so far, Susarkayev has shown that he's the real deal. He's sitting at 10-0 with 9 finishes, and if you recall, this is Hamzat's boy who won on the Contender Series back in August and then fought just 4 days later at UFC 319, winning both of those fights by finish. One by KO TKO, that leg kick in the Contender Series, and the fight on UFC 319 by rear naked choke. Well-rounded fighter, young, hungry, checks all of the boxes. Got the chance to chop it up with him for a little while out in Vegas a couple of weeks back, and this kid is definitely somebody who I think has a bright future and is going to follow along in the footsteps of some of his predecessors. He's under the tutelage of some great guys who have achieved some immeasurable success within the game. Opening up the card, you have Slava Claus taking on Mateos Camilo. Should be a fun fight at 155. Slava Claus, he needs a win. So does Camilo. I mean, they're both coming off of a loss, but Camilo only won, whereas Slavoclaws a couple of losses in a row. His last fight, he got guillotined by Terrence McKinney, so he's certainly going to look to go out there and get his hand raised. If we know one thing about Vyacheslav, Borslev, Slavoclaws, if it goes to the ground, he's in trouble. He's not a good grappler. As a kickboxer, though, he's a problem. How will Camilo approach this fight? That will probably give you a lean on which direction this is going to go. They're going to talk real quick for a couple of minutes here about LFA 222. LFA 222 is going down this Friday night up in Connecticut. There's going to be some great fights on this card, ladies and gentlemen. Just a couple of them to talk about here. You have a bantamweight title fight between Vinicius Pires, who is taking on Artem Balak. Artem is a client of my buddy, my good friend Ed Barnett, ECB Sports Management. So, from the homer standpoint, I got to give a route to Artem on this side. He's a tremendously talented fighter, but he's definitely going to have his hands full with Vinicius, who is a marauder within his own respect. Potentially a call for either one of these two guys pending the victor. You have a co-main event matchup between a couple of highly experienced lightweight veterans. You have the also Ultimate Fighter veteran, Skeletor Joe Giannetti. He's taken on Jose Ferreira. Ferreira comes by way of Valley Force Striking Systems. He's a training partner out there in Chicago with UFC lightweights like Ignacio Bahamondes, same camp that has guys like Bilal Muhammad and so on and so forth. It's a dangerous matchup for Joe, especially on the feet. On the ground, though, Joe Giannetti, he's a octopus who is going to be able to find some crafty ways to get subs, to try to get to the back. It's a matter of, can he get there? Can he get to his control positions where he is able to excel and doesn't have to weather a storm on the feet? Joe's a guy who I thought would have had a chance to excel and get into the dance and do a little noise some years back, but he's had some ups and downs throughout his run. And, whether it was while he was out in California with AKA to some different camps across the board, he's had his run in the LFA previously, a couple of Northeastern promotions. This could be his chance back toward getting in that conversation. But the real fight that I want to talk about from this card, I want to talk about the matchup between Alina Pereira, who is the current karate combat champion and the sister of current UFC light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira. She takes on our friend of the program, the Bosnian bombshell, Neyra Rep. Pereira has a great left hook. Shocker. I know. Imagine that. Poatan's sister has a great left hook. Must run in the family. But as an MMA fighter, what we've seen so far, she has been rather limited as far as a well-rounded skill set. She is only 1-2 as far as her professional MMA career, and it's been some time since we've seen her in the cage. So she could very well have made some considerable improvements since that time. Just being completely fair, but overall, based off of the body of work that we have seen in action, Neyra is the more well-rounded fighter. And just to also throw it out there, Neyra's coming off of a knockout of the year contender for the LFA women's division. All 4 of Neyra's wins are by KO TKO. So she's got the power just the same, and she's got an inner turmoil that when she's in there, she can flip the switch, and when, she might be going through a little bit of a firefight like she did in her last fight, but just decides to say enough, bites down, and finds a finishing blow. There's something to be said about somebody who, right now, Neyra's got the chip on her shoulder because all of the hype, all the recognition, all the talk is going toward Pereira. And in a sense, I get it. That's the politics of the game. They're up there in Connecticut where her brother calls home and trains of that Glover camp where she spends a considerable amount of time herself. The name alone, the familial connection, yeah, that's going to give a lot of the marketing points towards Pereira. But Nara's coming to take all of that. And she's hungry. She wants to go eat. I think that the wisest choice, if we're looking at it from a stylistic perspective, obviously is to utilize the grappling where she does have an advantage. But then again, fighters fight. I could also understand if she goes in there and she says, you know what, like I want to be able to work my game too. And she may hit hard, but I hit hard too. One way or the other, this should be a great fight. And yeah, we're running for you, girl. Go get it done. Now, just to talk real quick about a different but adjacent topic that we said we would talk about if we had a little bit more time earlier with Islam Makhachev. There's been a lot of talk through the time of Islam and Habib, obviously. So I pose to you guys, and I will go into depth here a little bit more of, well, what's the difference? When you take a look at both of those two guys and their respective paths, where Habib went to where he is now as a coach and where Islam is currently as the fighter, well, it's no shot in the dark to understand why they have all of the comparisons or why they're always spoken about in the same breath of air. I think that Islam is the more complete fighter. Now, some people out there are going to rattle their fists and say that's blasphemy. But should Islam get his hand raised, he will be either the 11th or 12th double champion in UFC history. 11th if Weili loses, 12th if Weili wins. This is something that his peer and now mentor, Habib Nurmagomedov, never attempted. There's obviously some explanatory factors into why Habib's run ended when it did. And overall, they're not at each other's throats for who's the better fighter or who is the more commanding presence by any means. But because of that connection dating back to their childhood, coming up from the same region of Dagestan, being trained by Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, hence father's plan, they have a very similar style in certain aspects of their game. But with all these similarities also comes a plethora of differences. Some of these differences come in terms of their approach, their personalities, and elements within their skill sets. So just giving you a side-by-side breakdown overall between the two of them. The Eagle, Habib Nurmagomedov, he retired at an undefeated 29-0 as the UFC lightweight champion. His style was relentless. He was a pressure wrestler with suffocating ground control. Habib's game was built around chaining his takedowns together and overwhelming his opponents with smothering top control, constant pressure, and a submission skill set that was funneled all based off of those dominant positions that he would find himself in. In terms of the mindset side of things, Habib was extremely aggressive and had more of like an anger emotion to him on the regular. Once he got you down, he would not let you breathe. He was as fierce as the bears that he wrestled against. His goal wasn't just to win. His goal was to break you. Mentally, physically, always possible. His striking was functional, but it was relatively basic. He mainly used that striking to be able to close the distance, but that grappling threat opened up the striking. Some of the strengths that Habib had, obviously, were his conditioning, his pressure, his dominance, the mental toughness, the mauling pace, in this mesh, brother, just that entire aura about him. Some of the weaknesses on Habib's side were his limited versatility when it came to the striking game, though it never really put him in a terribly compromised or a jeopardized position where he wasn't able to overcome it. In terms of legacy, he retired as one of the most dominant champions ever. He did only have the 3 title defenses, but those 3 title defenses were against 3 of the biggest names that the sport has seen, especially at lightweight. Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. Some of the major criticisms, people look back at those first 15 fights of his pro career. All you got to do is look at the Tapology, see what the record of some of those guys were, but that argument kind of becomes null and void because once he fought the best of the best and guys who actually did have decorated a caliber of respect with their resumes, he didn't stumble. Now, if we take a look at a quick breakdown on the Islam side of things, Islam is currently sitting at a record of 26-1. He's the former UFC lightweight champion. He vacated it to pursue this UFC welterweight title. With his striking, he's more refined and strategic. Islam uses his elite grappling and he mixes in smoother transitions. He has timing-based takedowns, and he does have stronger submission setups and versatility within his submissions. Mindset-wise, he's a lot more calm in demeanor and analytical. There's less emotion, but more precision. He fights like a technician rather than a destroyer. As far as a striker goes, he's much more evolved. He uses crisp boxing. He has a tremendous left kick, and his counter punching is much better than what Khabib's was. As far as his overall strengths, he's a very balanced fighter with a high IQ that has elite grappling that's been modernized with his striking. Weaknesses, though, is sometimes he does have a little bit of a lower pace, and he is more hittable than what Khabib was at times, but it's also because he's willing to stand and trade on the feet a little bit more. I think that that's worthy to say in that sense that, well, Khabib didn't get hit as often because he didn't stay there that much, whereas Islam will be more willing to fight you on the feet. In terms of legacy, he's an evolution of Khabib's style, just a more well-rounded version of it. If we're talking one of the major criticisms of Islam's career, well, he had the 2016 USADA vacation, but if we are keeping track of it, or if we are being balanced and giving coverage to it, it was later overturned for a therapeutic use exemption due to a medical procedure that he had. But there are still some folks out there that say, well, the compound that he popped for is one that does lead you to have increased endurance. Something to be said there. Running down the comparisons a little bit more, when it comes to grappling, Khabib was as fierce and as dominant of a smashing machine as we've seen. He's the reason why for so many years everyone was saying smash, or I'm going to smash your boy, or calling people a chicken. Same thing. Islam is a wet blanket who likes to smother his opponents, and his grappling style is a more smooth and technical variety where he's going to find some creative ends to his submissions. I mean, his short arm darce, that's something that I feel like we've seen a lot more people try to implement since Islam has shown the effectiveness of that technique. Khabib was much more rigid when he was on the feet, but it had its elements of effectiveness because he was that dominant and mauling of a grappler. We saw that manifest itself when he dropped Conor McGregor at UFC 229 because Conor was so worried about the takedown. It opened up the striking on the feet, gives him the chance to land that overhand, which sent the Notorious down to the canvas. Islam, though, he's more technically refined and dangerous as a striker. I mean, we've seen him put guys out. He does have the heartbreaking knockout that crushed all of us when he head kick KO'd Volkanovski. But when we talk about a major difference between these guys, it comes down to their personality and their demeanor. I won't go so far as to say that they have different mentalities, but I will say that their approach is different. Khabib, in so many instances, was the more fierce, stoic person who was there to impose his will with cold words and a vicious fighting style to match. Whereas Islam, on the other hand, Islam loves to joke around. Islam is a prankster. He has fun with the boys. He has fun with social media. He's got a quick wit about him within his interview responses. You're living under a rock if you haven't heard the saying, send him to Dagestan 2-3 years and forget, brother. Who give this guy a black belt? Some of these little things that Islam said throughout the years. Like, he's funny. Islam is just a different sort of personality in that sense. You know, I mean, the wit that he has and just willing to have banter and be fun. We see a little bit more of that with Khabib, you know, since he's retired, but still overall, Islam is the jokester, and we've said it on this program before that Islam would be thought of as that same level of dominance or fearful guy as Khabib if he had the same sort of stoic personality. But maybe some people don't treat Islam with that same level of ferociousness or whatever descriptive word you want to put to it, simply because he is more of a prankster, or he does like to kind of be, you know, kind of the class clown, if you will. Obviously, the major point that many are going to take in favor of Khabib was that he retired undefeated. He never lost, whereas Islam has that 2015 knockout loss against Adriano Martins. Now, it is a major point for Khabib, not discrediting that at all. But it's also worth noting that the loss that Islam suffered was a case of him getting caught and clipped early in the fight versus being walked down and finished. Had Khabib chosen to spend more time on the feet, especially earlier in his career, we'd have likely seen more sequences like the one with Michael Johnson where he did get wobbled. Again, hard to speculate, but the odds speak more in that favor. Khabib retired in the peak of his title reign following his title defense against Justin Gaethje, and this was the only fight that Khabib took posthumously for Abdulmanap. Khabib said that he promised his mother that he was not going to fight again, and he's upheld that promise. You know, a lot of people thought that Khabib would do the, okay, I'm going to step away for a couple of years, then I'll come back. It's not the case. He even completely walked away from MMA altogether for a considerable amount of time. But then it was more or less a thing of, well, he came to the realization that he still had so much knowledge and information to be able to offer his cousins and Usman and Umar, as well as to Islam and the rest of that Eagle camp, that he just couldn't stay away. And Khabib has since said that, you know, once those guys' runs are done, that he's going to walk away as well. We'll see how that all goes. But one of the criticisms to Khabib was that he didn't stick around for long enough to either A, see his downfall or pass the torch. But that's also admired by many, that he had the wherewithal to be able to say, nope, I'm going to walk out on top. Two sides of the same coin. Just depends on where you sit on that discussion. Obviously, we saw people like Ronda Rousey criticizing that a couple of weeks ago, saying that, well, Khabib is only thought of as a guy because he walked away on top. Again, everybody can form their own opinions. Khabib going out on top, though, is what opened the door for Islam to be able to come in and pursue the title, which was what was Father's plan. Islam took the torch and ran with it by winning the UFC lightweight crown. He defended it 4 times successfully before opting to pursue this welterweight title this weekend. If Islam gets his hand raised this Saturday at UFC 322 inside of the Fight Mecca against Madison Square Garden, against Jack Della Maddalena, who has the Craig Jones factor going for him, then the debate is over. What do you guys think, though? Who is the superior guy in that conversation? You could let me know on Instagram or on Threads at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. And now we're going to close out the program by going 3 rounds.
Paramount Plus prices are increasing coming in 2026 as the UFC broadcast deal will kick off then. What are your thoughts?
I'm not surprised. Bringing the whole Nate Diaz clip in this sense once again. Guys, when they first announced the deal and they said that, oh, prices aren't going up right now. Well, I guess they told the truth, because for a couple of months, the Paramount prices stayed the same and didn't go up. But I had skeptical hippo eyes to that statement, because it's only logical that the prices were going to have to rise. We're not even talking about the 7-year, $7.7 billion deal that the UFC inked with Paramount Plus. They had a multitude of other multi-billion-dollar acquisitions over the last year. Cost has to be made up in some place. And, the easiest way for the execs to pass the buck along to recover some of those expenses is capitalism. You pass it on to the consumer.
UFC veteran Godofredo Pepe found dead in Florida jail cell. Your reaction?
Well, first, I just want to let you guys know what he was locked up for. He was locked up in June on 4 separate charges. He had a kidnapping with intent to inflict bodily harm and terrorize the victim, domestic battery by strangulation, tampering and hindering with or delaying investigations and communications, and battery domestic violence. Now, he pleaded not guilty to these, but circumstantial evidence and things that have been let known, well, it wasn't looking good. The elephant in the room of this discussion obviously is always going to be CTE. But that doesn't make an excuse for the actions. That doesn't pardon him from some of those things. Now, is it sad that this was the outcome, that he turned to taking his own life? It was reported that the official report from the sheriff's department, or the facility where he was incarcerated at, they said that he was found unresponsive and pronounced dead within his cell, but they also said that they found him with a sheet wrapped around his neck. Well, do the math. In a sense, you kind of took the coward's way out.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Changes are coming to the enforcement of the eye poke penalty. Will it make a difference?
I mean, Herb Dean had his whole big video that he put out yesterday. The rule has been in place for years. The rule is supposed to be that a deduction would be enforced for committing these fouls, though it's been very poorly enforced. When we're taking a look at the frequency of actual point deductions in relation to infractions that occur, it's a low percentage. That has to change. I've been to countless rules meetings before fight cards, and one of the talking points that is always mentioned, or at least especially out here in the state of Colorado, this is your warning here in the back. You grab the fence, you poke an eye, you have a groin kick that is, anything other than a slip. We're looking at a point deduction. It's a penalty. But even still then, very rarely does that actually get enforced. Yes, there is the whole thought that, they're giving the warning in there and trying to give them the benefit. But when we're operating on essentially what's been a 1-point scoring system within our 10-point must system, as most fights, especially when they're a closer bout, they're at a 29-28 clip. That point deduction would mean something. That point deduction would actually have a factor in fights. And when we look at where the statistical analysis favors the person who committed the foul versus the person who got fouled and the ultimate victory, there's got to be something that changes. Minor or major, an eye poke significantly hinders your ability to go forward at your highest level of effectiveness within a fight. There are guys who have had the Iron Man level of fights in the UFC, like Jim Miller, who throughout his entire career has never poked anybody in the eye. Whereas you have some other guys who are more frequenters of the infraction. Stylistically, if these point deductions are enforced the way that they should be, especially for eye pokes, that's going to change the way that some of these guys handle the action. We see it a lot of times where fingers get extended in, rangefinders or in trying to separate and get distance. They always say, oh, well, you can have your hand straight up, but at the end of that hand being straight up as you're framing or pulling away, there's a natural tendency where the fingers start to dip forward. On the flip side, you have some other guys out there who, within his statement, Herb Dean cited Sean Strickland as saying that he's kind of his golden child for this, and that Sean uses a closed fist and his parry and his popping and finding and all of these. We've spoke about it countless amount of times throughout the years on this program that fouls, judging, officiating decisions, they're a pain point. This is hopefully, now that there was a diligent effort and a pointed conversation for this topic, hopefully that catalyzes some change for the betterment of the sport going forward. But just like that, though, folks, we are all out of time. That wraps it up for another week of original combat sports programming here at the MMA Plug. Now, if you guys have any thoughts on any of our discussions today, please reach out. Let me know on Instagram or on Threads at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. There is that massive card going down this weekend at Madison Square Garden. You also have that LFA card going down on Friday night. If you're tuning in, let me know who you have your eyes on. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. Want to give a big thank you to my man, Danny Bailey, always holding it down for me behind the boards. Also, shout out to the number 38 presented by Volo out here. We'll be back next week. Same time, same place. I'm Jordan Kurtz. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.